trade-offs visible, the leadership skill most teams avoid. I'm bringing this up for three reasons. One, because most teams are not failing from lack of talent, they're failing from priority overload. Two, because leaders often try to avoid disappointment, and that turns into vague yes leadership. And three, because until trade-offs are explicit, execution often becomes churn and people work hard, but nothing moves clearly. So why me? I'm a psychotherapist and an executive coach and founder of EPC Leadership, Executive Performance Coaching. And I work with executives and leadership teams in high pressure environments where decisions, messaging, follow through have and hold under real constraints. And I'm coming at this from three different angles. The first one is performance psychology, what leaders do under pressure. And the second is strategic execution, how priorities become operational reality. And the third is systems leadership, how decisions translate across layers. So here's my perspective. Really, let me start with the line that I think explains 80% of leadership dysfunction. So until something is explicitly deprioritized, nothing is actually prioritized. Sorry about that. And if everything is important, nothing is. If every initiative stays alive, execution gets diluted. And if leaders won't say not now, teams live in constant ambiguity. And obviously, ambiguity is not neutral. Ambiguity often creates hesitation, politics, overwork, duplicated effort, and a culture where people stop trusting priorities. So when I say make the trade-offs visible, I mean making the real costs of a priority explicit. What we're choosing, what we're not choosing, what we're delaying, and what we're willing to disappoint people about. That's true leadership. So why teams often avoid these trade-offs? It's not logical, it's human, because most teams don't avoid trade-offs because they don't understand them. They avoid them because trade-offs can create discomfort. Trade-offs force you to answer questions like, who's not going to be happy with this? Or what are we going to stop doing? What will not get resourced? Or what if we're wrong? And what if this hurts someone's status? Or what if I disappoint my board or my team or my peers? So the avoidance isn't strategic, it's actually emotional. And this is where my EPC lens comes in, specifically the inner architecture, specifically about leaders avoiding disappointing people. At the inner architecture level, trade-off avoidance often comes from a simpler driver. Leaders don't want to disappoint people or fail. Sometimes it's approval seeking or conflict avoidance. Sometimes it's identity, like I'm the leader who can handle everything. And obviously sometimes it's fear. If I say no, I'll lose my support. So instead of saying not this quarter or we don't have the current capacity or this is a lower priority or that is a no, leaders say softer things like, let's keep it on the list, or we'll circle back to it. We'll try, we'll see what we can do, or they keep bringing up the same idea. And so the team can often hear things like, well, everything matters, but everything matters is not leadership. It's just more pressure without direction. In my strategic alignment, everything becomes priority. And when leaders can't name the trade-offs, the strategy becomes a menu and not a plan. And you see the predictable symptoms. Too many initiatives activate at once, or priorities that change daily, weekly, monthly, projects that start and often stall, or busy calendars with actually little no traction or direction. I often see leadership meetings that turn into updates instead of actual decisions. And higher performers, they start to disengage because the effort doesn't lead to the progress. So this is why more communication often doesn't fix the alignment. You don't need more explanation. You need ranked priorities with explicit sacrifice. Strategy is not what you say you care about. Strategy is what you're willing to deprioritize. So in my adaptive leadership, we talk about where no real movement occurs. So here's where my adaptive leadership comes in. If you don't create a real trade-off, you don't create real movement. Why? Because change requires loss, and every meaningful shift creates some form of loss of comfort, loss of control, loss of status, loss of the old identity, the way we've done things, or a preferred plan. And when leadership tries to protect everyone from that discomfort, the system will ultimately stay stuck. You get all this motivation without progress, and all this activity without adaptation. And the organization becomes performative. And people are going to look busy, but the core issue is going to remain untouched. So here's the hard truth. Even if you refuse to make the trade-offs explicit, your organization will still make them. They just become hidden, and the hidden trade-offs will often look like a drop in quality, or timelines are going to slip, or people will burn out. Managers are going to start protecting their own teams and their name. Cross-function is going to erode ultimately, especially with trust, and politics are going to increase because the resources are unclear. And the loudest voice wins the attention. So trade-offs aren't optional, visibility is. So either leaders choose trade-offs consciously, or the system chooses them through chaos. So what does it look like when trade-offs are visible, right? That's the felt sense, right? So when a leadership team gets good at this, you're going to feel the difference in several ways. So there's a calmer urgency, there's a clearer ownership, there's going to be fewer meetings, fewer status updates, less escalation, more follow through, less theater and talking about it, and a sense of fairness, even when people don't love the decision. Because what people can tolerate is disappointment with clarity. What they can't tolerate is disappointment with confusion. And visible trade-offs reduce resentment because they reduce the guessing. The guesswork gets taken out of it. So when we look at a decision framework, 3 words come to mind. It's priority, price, and proof. And here's I think a clean way for trade-offs in real time to look. So whenever someone says this is a priority, let's run some questions. Let's run the priority question. Where does this rank? Not is this important, because then everything's important. And the second one, right? So let's look at the price. What are we willing to deprioritize to fund this, whether it's time or people, attention or budget? It's like, what is the cost going to be? And then the third is, what's the proof? What will we measure to prove this is worth it? What changes by when? This prevents strategy theater because it forces the priority to become operational. So if you want to make this practical, there's a few lines I think you could immediately install for trade-off visibility. So for example, if this is a priority, what becomes less important? Have someone answer that question. What are we saying no to this quarter? And what will stop happening, or what will we stop doing so we don't burn people out and waste resources? We can do anything, but we can't do everything. So what are we sacrificing here? And what would we have to believe for this to be worth the cost? This specific language changes the culture because it makes leadership explicit. Now, if we look at team level integration, such as your direct reports or your management layers, there's an integration point because trade-offs have to travel. If the executive team makes trade-offs, but middle management can't translate them, you're still going to get a lot of churn. So you need 3 levels of visibility. So one, team leadership team, right? Ranked priorities, explicit not now lists or now list. We need to give decision rights. We need a cadence for revisiting these trade-offs so they're not stable or not emotional, or so they are stable. The second is direct reports. We have to have clear ownership. We need autonomy with guardrails. We need escalation rules. So what comes up, what stays down. And we need to be able to have the ability to say, that's not the priority right now. And then obviously the third is management layer. So this is where trade-offs become execution. Managers need to be able to message in 1 to 2 sentences, like, here's what matters this week. Because consistent meetings don't do that. We need consistent meeting outputs, the owners, the deadlines, the dependencies. And we also need clarity on what is deprioritized so they stop overworking their teams just in case. Because when trade-offs are unclear, managers compensate with overwork. Also, when we think about the emotional side of trade-offs, disappointment is part of leadership, and that is okay. That's really a maturity point, in my opinion. And if you want to lead at a high level, you have to be able to tolerate disappointment, your own and other people's. And the goal, obviously, is not to keep everyone happy. The goal is to keep the system coherent. So when leaders stop trying to avoid disappointment, the teams trust them more because clarity feels like integrity. And there is a cost to having this nice leadership. So there's a version of nice that is actually harmful, right? So it's the niceness that won't name reality. It won't say no, it won't draw lines, it won't disappoint anyone. And so things happen. The team ultimately pays the cost. They're going to work more, they're going to scramble, they're going to lose confidence. They may even start to resent you and leadership. These visible trade-offs are kinder than vague yeses because they protect people from false urgency and impossible expectations. So remember, strategic alignment isn't created by what you add, it's created by what you remove. Trade-offs are removal, and removal is leadership. So a few questions for you to reflect on. Where are we pretending everything is a priority because we don't want to disappoint anyone? What are we currently doing that should be explicitly deprioritized? If we named our trade-offs clearly, what would get easier immediately? Decisions, morale, or execution? So this is my perspective on why making trade-offs visible is one of the most avoided and most powerful leadership skills. Until something is explicitly deprioritized, nothing is actually prioritized. Thanks for listening. I'll see you next time.